This is a post-Christian podcast.
Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
All right. Well, today we are, I was talking about just, everything that's going on right now. And, it's devastating to see the police violence continue. It's really tough to see that. It's also amazing to see some of the changes that are being made, especially here in, we can see happening. I've got a lot of questions. Over the past few years, I've become someone who likes to look into things and study things and try to figure everything out. And that's what I've been doing and trying to support my friends who are out there doing really amazing work. I was invited recently to go to a march with pastors, and unfortunately having kids, I wasn't able to go. So life is weird right now, and it's strange being a dad. A few years ago, I could have done whatever I wanted. But anyway, that's where we're at right now. But I hope you're all doing well. Just an update, my neighborhood was, a lot of it was burnt down, and that is difficult. It was difficult explaining it to my kids. What I think a lot of us who are parents are trying to explain things to our kids. I was able to sit down and read a really great book on Martin Luther King Jr. with my kids, and Milo really loved it, which was really exciting. So having those important conversations with our kids, because the future is really, the children are the future, I've heard. And helping them not continue to build on this system that's hurt so many people. And I'm hoping as the system changes that we move into that we reform into something better. I always fear that the rich will come in and take advantage of movements, and my hope and prayers and work will be towards not seeing capitalism take over these movements. And anyway, I've been studying a lot lately, and I've been reading a little bit of Hegel, and I want to share that with you today. And so we're going to get in that, and we'll probably do some crossover stuff. But I wanted to talk about something that I think we all can relate to is Christianity. And some of us here are Christians, some of us are not Christians, some of us are agnostic Christians, Christian atheists, just agnostics. That's what I love about this congregation, is because we're a diverse group of people. And we truly are learning to work together and respect one another's differences and talk about one another's differences. And that's where change happens. That's where love happens. And that's how equality is built upon. But recently I've been reading a book about Hegel and the philosopher Hegel, and it's really blown my mind, and I really want to share some of this with you. And so Christianity, I've always been a speaker of grace. I've always talked about grace, and Christianity is being a Christian is free, grace is free, and what is grace, and what does grace outside of Christianity look like? But one of the things I was kind of looking at as I was reading this book and seeing the transformation on Hegel's work over the years, seeing how his views of Christianity changed as a philosopher and radically changed his whole philosophy, really blew my mind. And so one of the things that I really realized is, and I've probably realized this before and said it before, but I don't know, but one of the things I was thinking about is, what is the key to Christianity? And I believe that key is love. I believe the key to Christianity is love. So maybe, for all of us good legalistic kids who grew up evangelical, maybe the requirement to be free is the freedom of grace, but the idea is to connect with Christianity. Love is the key. Love is what transforms Christianity from a religion of morals and good deeds and works and the way we should think or not think. It transforms that when we enter it within love, when we allow love to be what transforms us. So let's look at this more. Without it, it's, I said it's just a practice. We enter into a practice. Christianity just becomes a practice when we enter into it. And I think when a lot of people really enter into it, it becomes this practice of I go to church on Sunday and I interact with the music and the liturgy and, the sermon and the pastor, and it becomes this process. And we go, what is this? And it becomes kind of a practice in our lives. But the hope from this practice, the idea behind this practice, that you can't really authentically experience this practice without love. That the key to Christianity, what makes Christianity beyond religion, is an experience with love. And everything filtered through love. And realizing that when Christ came, he was somewhat reforming Judaism in a way. And what he continued to bring back, though, to it was this concept of love. This love that, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye, but I say, love your enemy. And the idea was love. He brought it in and said, it's not about duties and works and these practices of religion that makes us just good, moral human beings. It's beyond that. And it's, and that's love. We're going to get into that a little bit more. These are just some little notes I took. So, Christ and Paul are trying to help us realize in our life what it is love. What does love look like? But Christ and Paul seem to come in and try to help us manage what love is, grasp this concept of love. What is love? And Hegel, probably, I guess depending on what type of philosophy you subscribe to, but is probably one of the, if not the greatest, one of the greatest philosophers to have ever lived, and probably one of the smartest human beings to live. Have you ever tried to read Hegel? Almost impossible. I've been reading a book about Hegel, and it's allowed me to now start to open up some Hegel, but of his own writings. But in 1797, Hegel came to see Christianity as a religion of love. It was no longer a religion of moral law. And this was a big moment for Hegel, because Hegel had, before this, always just seen Christianity as a good moral law, and he saw it just the same as all religions, and he thought, it's positive, it's good, it's moral, but somehow love all of a sudden struck him. And he has these two different essays that he wrote, one on Christianity before this love moment, and then one around 1797, 98, that he wrote on love, of Christianity and love. And it completely transforms his view. And it's really amazing. So it becomes a moment for Hegel, revolutionary for one of our greatest thinking minds, changes his philosophy and takes him into his own. He becomes his own in the moment where he experiences the love that he finds in Christianity. And even through the resurrection, which is for me, the death and resurrection, I always kind of struggle like with some of those ideas of what does resurrection really bring us? But for Hegel, those things, he saw that love, moved out through life, through death, through a new being. And it really is amazing. And so Hegel really becomes his own when he understands the love of Christianity. And it should be, this should be the type of thing that happens for us. I think when we experience the love of this faith, and we ask ourselves why we're involved in this faith, is I think ideas like love is a lot of why draws us in. There's a lot of us who listen on Revolution online or watch it live here, who we don't know why we're sticking around. Why are we sticking around a system that's abused us? Why are we sticking around something that's hurt us? And at the same point, we all see this kind of, thread of grace and this thread of love that keeps drawing us back in, that says, I still want to be in this community. I still want to talk about this. There's something about Jesus. There's something about Paul the Apostle. There's something there that continues to draw me in. And I think when we look at someone like Hegel, a brilliant philosopher, and see that even this transformed him, that it's not something that we're just brainwashed, or we're just simple people. We're just simple people, And one of the things I liked that I think Hegel saw is that Hegel was big into the idea of contradiction. And that we all have contradictions that only thing we do is realize they're there. We can't change those contradictions. And one of the things he realized is that love not only accepts that contradiction and embraces that contradiction, but almost in a way validates that contradiction. And that's a really amazing place to be. And if you think about how powerful love is, I'm trying not to get ahead of myself here because I've got it kind of in a process, but I kind of want to jump ahead, so I'm going to try not to. But we'll see in a minute that love does embrace this idea of contradiction. And that the power of love is that it has contradictions within it, and how that works. It's really, really beautiful. And, so Jay, some of you might be thinking well, I tune into Revolution because I want to talk about what's going on now and what's happening in the world. And, and I get that, I'm in the middle of it. And what I'm going to say is I believe that this talk today has completely to do with what we're going through in this world and how we react to what's going on with social unrest, with basically a revolution happening, a real revolution happening, and a movement happening, and riots happening, and it's an amazing time to be alive. I didn't think I would see something like this in my lifetime. At the same time, going through a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic. Yesterday, I went to a flea market. I thought I'd drive out to a flea market. I was like, I just need something normal. I'm going to go to a flea market for an hour. That's my favorite thing in the world. Unfortunately, Minneapolis is zoned so you can't have flea markets. I don't know why. That seems unjust. So I drove an hour out to this flea market and pulled up, and there's, and they were social distancing and masks. So I was like, okay, pull up. Not one person is social distancing. There's hundreds of people there, and I literally saw maybe 5 masks. Oh, no. So I just turned around and enjoyed the drive. It was kind of a bummer because you see everybody on the news who are like, these protesters need to go get checked. They're causing problems, or Donald Trump's having these meetings and these rallies, and he's going to get everybody COVID. And then I drive up to a giant flea market, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe you should also be mentioning giant flea markets that no one's wearing masks at, And that's kind of how life is, and with our contradictions and everything like that. If we just live our life focused on Facebook or the news even, or, Instagram, we think like, oh, it's the protesters and Trump and this is all spreading because of that, and then I drive an hour out of town and no one is wearing a mask and hundreds of people gathered together. You know what I mean? It's just, I went into the gas station today. I always get Caleb some coffee before we get here. Only guy with the mask, me and the people working there. And it's like, so it's just funny how we even create scapegoats unconsciously, like, oh, it's these people and these people. Like, no, it's all of us. We're acting like nothing happened. Like, oh, something else is happening in the news, so we don't need to wear these anymore. And we have this short attention span, and it doesn't allow us to be critical thinkers, because all of a sudden we're supposed to jump into this situation and not look at that situation. And what I'm trying to do in my own work, in my own life, and I want to encourage you guys to do this too, is when I'm always saying think, 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 what I want to help you to do is think. I don't want you to believe everything I say. What I want you to do is think, and I want you to think critically and look into things. Is that sometimes we have to look into things and understand things. I'm a big Martin Luther King Jr., as everybody probably knows, is my hero. And he said, it's not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends that we'll remember. And I love that quote. It changed my life. It really did. But I've also have to temper it with the idea of not speaking out of ignorance. And, reminding myself, like, why do I wear a mask as I wear a mask for the other? Why do I do this? Because the mask isn't for me, but, why do I protest? Why do I support these people? Why do I go out and do this? Why do I, why do we desperately need civil rights in this country? Beyond civil rights at this point, we need equal rights, pure equality, and I've gotten a little bit of a rabbit trail here, but what I'm trying to say is that we let our focus move just so quickly because of the social media and because of the news and whatever they report. And so it's hard to be a critical thinker. But I want to encourage you guys, ways you can be a critical thinker is looking things up online, knowing what your news sources are, trying to read them with critical eyes, knowing that they're not going to be all right or all, because no one's, not a lot of reporters are experts on social justice or on, pandemics or, on capitalism or things like that. But just educating ourselves to think well. And what does this have to do with love? That's what blew Hegel's mind. And Hegel is the great philosopher and asks the great questions and thinks deeply. Oh, shoot, I just got disconnected. Okay, and so he thinks deeply. Got disconnected again. Hopefully we're still connected. And tries to think deeply and ask the important questions. And what he realizes is that with that concept of that view of love, it radically changes that. So when we think deeply, we think through with the concept of love. And we're going to talk about love and get even further into it and how amazing it is. And I know we all know love, but love really does get amazing. So for Hegel, love is the only, for Hegel, it's only love that points beyond the structures of moral law. And whether that be moral law from, religious law, different religious laws, my own moral law, no matter what that is that love, it's only love that points beyond it. So we might have this own, like, oh, I have my own philosophy, or, oh, I grew up this way, so my political thinking is this way, and so I've created my own moral law. This is how I was treated as a kid or as an adult by these people, so this is how I'm going to treat them back, or this is how I was raised. So what goes beyond that? And love is the one that points beyond that. Love is the one that points beyond and says, okay, I don't want to scapegoat every single conservative. I'm not a conservative myself. But it also says, I don't want to scapegoat every progressive either. And I'm not a progressive myself either. See, I'm not going to let you stick a finger and put me in a place because I just don't have a place to sit right now and rest politically for anybody. Sorry. But that's because I'm trying to think critically. And sometimes when you're thinking critically, there's that lack there. There's that gap there that you kind of have to live in this uncomfortable gap of going like, here I am, not going to make everybody happy because I'm not going to be able to tweet the perfect tweet or say the right thing or use the right hashtag. But I can say that love is guiding me into these concepts and these ideas that is always moving me beyond my moral structure, which is causing an evolution in my own thinking and my own life. And I think what you see with what's going on in this country is you're seeing a lot of people change things out of love and seeing things past their moral law. But you also see some people who are completely stuck within their moral law, and another person completely stuck in the moral law. And what happens is we come to conflict when we're unjust system, or need for justice, this controlling justice. It's like moral. Do we win it with moral law or do we win it with love? And I'm a firm believer that we win it through love. And love looks different for a lot of people, But I definitely think people going out there protesting, making these changes and difference are showing a type of love. And a lot of them have moved beyond the moral law, for different reasons. And we could spend hours on that, but I just want to throw some light on that to let you know that this is something that really works for today. This is something that in this moment we find ourselves in is something to focus on. So just be able to critically think, get past your own moral law, and allow love to do that. So Todd McGowan, who wrote a book on Hegel, a book called Emancipation After Hegel, which is mind-blowing book and sometimes really good chapter, and the next time a chapter I can't understand and I have to read 15 times. But also the type of book where I found like paragraphs that I could spend weeks on, which I really love the idea. And I think that's what I'm starting to love about philosophy is that I can spend so much time on a paragraph that someone writes because I want to simplify it and I want to talk about it here with you guys. So Todd McGowan wrote a book on Hegel, and he says this about Hegel. He says about Hegel's ideas of love. He goes, love has no limits because in contrast to duty, it has the ability to identify with the difference of the other without eliminating that difference. Did you hear that? It says love has no limits because in contrast to duty, it has the ability to identify with the difference of the other without eliminating the difference. And sometimes love will go in and celebrate that difference. And so that's a pretty amazing thing, no limits. And it contrasts with duty. And I was thinking about that word duty. It's a funny word.
You said duty.
But there's a Pedro the Lion song, and that said, if all is left is duty, then I'm falling on my sword. At least then I would not have to serve an unseen, distant Lord. And, the idea of just like, I think for a lot of us who grew up in that time in the 80s and 90s in evangelical religion, it just seemed to be all work-based, all about duty, all about your duties. And but even now, because people's idea of what righteousness is and different things change, it can still become all about duty. Oh, are you not doing this? Well, I did this, and I didn't. And you'll see a lot of people, what they post on, on online and things like this. By sometimes we're signaling to where we're at and where we stand and what our work is and our duty, And Hegel and Todd McGowan, who's luckily helped explain Hegel to me because I would not be able to read Hegel without Todd McGowan. He says, shows that love has no limits because it's in contrast to duty. It has the ability to identify with the difference of the other without eliminating that difference. So often we don't have to go here, and I have to be right, or you have to be right, or we're done. He's saying that Hegel's arguing that there's some way to come in and see the differences and not try to eliminate those differences. That's a tough one. That is a really tough thing to do. But then if you think about Martin Luther King, and he goes, darkness can't now drive out darkness. Hate does not drive out hate. The only thing that can change an enemy into a friend is love. So when love goes in, and the idea of not having this agenda, when you love without an agenda, which is hard to do for a lot of us because we are stuck in our own moral law that thinks that we've got to convert someone else to our moral law, because our moral law at this given time and moment, we all feel like we've arrived and created the perfect thing, and now we've got the right moral law, so we should change this person. But with loving without this expectation of change, you can come together, and maybe your moral law is going to change. And maybe their moral law is going to change. But the fact is, when love goes beyond that, then darkness can't drive out the darkness. Only light drives out darkness. So love is the only force capable of turning an enemy to a friend. You see these things come together, and maybe that love is the one thing that illuminates what needs to be changed. And I think we sell short the ideas of compromise and things like that, because we think, well, I don't want to compromise, and we make compromise a bad word. But what we don't realize is that somebody here might have an idea, and this person have an idea, and neither one of them are fine-tuned. But bringing these two together with love, where there is able to have the conversation. We talked about that a few weeks ago. When two people come together, there's a mutual recognition of their humanity to speak and talk. And Dr. King saw that quite often, is that was the most powerful thing he could do, is bring people together and have conversation and talk from different aisles or different communities or different groups and discuss this thing and see what comes out of that. Where love transforms those moments radically. Now, King knew what he wanted, and he brought that to two people, and he made great change. But it came at the ultimate price. But it came through a concept of love, the concept of loving. Now, this is a hard one to conceive, because I don't know if we all have, sometimes it's just easy to be like, oh, love, it sounds like, all you need is love, peace, and hippie stuff. And, that didn't work, Jay. And no, I get that. I'm not saying we don't think critically. I'm not saying we don't disagree. But that we're sorry, the sound's low. But yeah, we try to love beyond ourselves. We try to love, what I'm going to say is we try to love beyond our own moral law. We love beyond our own morality, if that makes sense. And then we maybe really do change the system. It takes longer, And right now, I think the system that's being changed, we've got to remember, it's taken hundreds and hundreds of years. And so I think steps that are being made right now to change these unjust laws are proper things to be done. But I also know that there's going to become a time where you have to sit down and agree to one another of what these things are going to look like. And that's when love is going to be important. That's when thinking well, thinking critically, understanding the issues, understanding the laws, understanding where they come from, why they're there, and what's just about them, what's unjust about them, and what needs to be changed. So when we do come together, we have the facts, we have the thoughts, the ideas, our own moral codes, and bring those together and have those discussions. But those discussions will be changed through mutual respect, through love. You say, well, Jay, they're probably not going to respect me. They're not going to like this. We're a lot of times talking about people in politics. You might be right. But don't let that make you give up love, because love, I think, can even take you further, because it also can expose the hatred or the other person's motives. When you come in loving and showing grace, can change things. So that's a tough thing. I see here it says love also demands boundaries. Someone wrote, love honoring self and others. We're gonna talk about that in a minute, actually, and I think it's important to look at, because I think I'm going to talk about Corinthians 13 in a minute, and I think if we just focused on Corinthians 13, you don't see a whole lot of room for boundaries in Corinthians 13. But I think we're going to look at what Hegel has to say. I think we're going to realize there are room for those and where we build boundaries of love. And I do believe we have to love certain people from afar, because it's not possible for us to do. And if, I've studied a lot of nonviolence, and I've realized to live a nonviolent life, there's certain people I just have to hold it at a way, or there's certain people I can't communicate with right now in my life, that I need some time, I need some space to hopefully one day that relationship will be held. So yeah, I think boundaries are important, but I'm not there yet. But realizing that love enacts and sustains contradictions, which is pretty amazing. And so contradictions, which are going to always be a reality of life, we're never going to get away from them. You can maybe prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong on that. Prove Hegel wrong on that. I'm open to that. But as far as I know and can understand, to my limited understanding of the world, is that we're in humanity, is that we will always have contradictions, but love learns to embrace those contradictions and almost becomes part of those contradictions. And realizing that can really help us. But love can also destroy our stability. Are you ready for that? When you love someone, sometimes you can't. There's not a choice. Sometimes there's this idea where you really love someone. Have you ever been let's just say romantic love, for an example? And sometimes people are like, Jay, you need to separate romantic love and friendship love and family love. Right now I'm not going to do that. So help me here. Just join me in my fantasy. Romantic love. Have you ever met someone and been romantically attracted to them and liked them, and then maybe eventually you had to draw a boundary with them, but before that, you saw this person, you connect with this person, and you go, oh man, this is going to hurt. You just know, like, I'm crazy about this person. I want to be with this person. They illuminate the room when they walk in. And then there's those red flags we always hear about, and we're just like, oh, I don't see any red flags, or, oh, I love red, it's so romantic. A dozen red flags for me. But we know it's going to hurt, or sometimes, we sacrifice things for people we love, and sometimes we sacrifice the very people we love because we love them. Someone says, oh, I want to get married, but I need to go to school first, and I need to do this, and you're just like, this is the person I love, but I want to see them happy. I want to see their lives fulfilled. Okay, you're right, we should break up, and you do it not because you don't want to be with the person, you do it because you love the person, knowing that it's going to hurt you. But you embrace that love and that pain and everything that comes with it. And so love destroys our stability. I mean, my love for my LGBTQ brothers and sisters, for example, in my own life, really messed with my stability. I was like, I can't be silent. I can't do this. I've got to do this. I've got to go there. I've got to march. I've got to meet with people. I've got to sit down and have hard conversations with people. I've got to do this. There's no choice because this is love, and love is driving me to do it. And and it's going to get my stability, but love, you get passion, and stability changes. Or if you enter into any type of friendship, you realize that person's a little bit different than you, and you make allowances. Love makes allowances for those differences. Or when you enter into a romantic relationship, hopefully a healthy one, not a toxic one, but you realize there's certain things that when you become a member or you raise family together, you have to change and you do certain things. And love really does become this unstabilizing force in so many different ways. Being divorced twice, from two people that I loved very much in those times when that happened. And I wanted to, there was a part of me that wanted to just hold on to that love and hold on to them, and I couldn't anymore. And I knew the best thing for me to do was to go through my own pain, to learn how to maybe extinguish that love a bit and let them go, because I wasn't making them happy, because I wasn't fulfilling that place. And that was really tough. It's really tough to love and not be loved. I think a lot of us have probably been there as well. Mm-hmm. Even in family, where you feel like your family, family members don't care about you. They don't reach out to you. They don't talk to you, and you love them, or their politics are different, or their beliefs and faith are different. And that love, and it makes it distable. You're not stabilized. You're constantly, you have this relationship that's painful to work through. It's not easy. For Hegel, Christianity became the most revolutionary religion conceived. In his mind, all of a sudden, one of the greatest thinkers of time became completely revolutionized, completely unstabilized by the idea of love. When love was not involved in Christianity, he just saw it as something that was good, moral, not bad, but not really different from any other faith or religion. And I'm not trying to tout that our religion's number one. I'm just looking at Hegel. We got a cat behind us, everybody. Guest star. Mongo in the house. We're going to tear down the whole backstage for you guys, the backstage. But Hegel, he because of love, he is transformed into a different type of philosopher, still brilliant and still revolutionary, but it's because love. So let's look at Corinthians 13 for a second. And I think this is the big love verse in the Bible. We hear it at weddings all the time. Honestly, I don't recommend Corinthians 13 for weddings anymore. Just because it's, I think someone had mentioned earlier boundaries in love. I think when you're in a relationship with somebody, you both need to make clear boundaries and set ideas of expectations and things like that, and work through that, and allow love to cover the mistakes, of course. But this one's this is a tall duty here. It's very romantic, but it's not about romantic love. It says, love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. Now, so far, I've been all these things. It does not rejoice in wrongdoings, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. So when you kind of get that this is what love does, this is a concept of Christianity. I think this is one of the areas that Hegel's probably going like, wow, this is a really amazing thing. You also have Christ's last commandment, when he's at the Last Supper, he goes, I want to give you a new commandment. And they go, oh, what is that? And he goes, love each other, which I don't think would be the first time they heard that. And they go like, what? And he goes, no, I really want you to love each other because people know that you belong to me for your love for one another. And then we see that Paul comes out here and gives us this really beautiful explanation of love. What's interesting, and this is why I think religion, much like a lot of the, maybe like how we see, it's funny because we see the police form and need to change and need of reform or need to be taken down altogether. Everybody's got different ideas and opinions on that. I feel the same way about the church. I mean, the church has hurt people, killed people, violently persecuted people, tore apart homes, and different things like that. And maybe the church needs to be completely torn down. I'm not sure. But when Paul starts out in 1 Corinthians 13, he says, if I speak in a tongues of mortals and angels, but do not have love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all the mysteries and all knowledge, and I have all faith as for to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so I may be boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. And I think what we see a lot of in our religion and the tough parts of our religion and the abuse of Christianity is a faith without love. I think when Hegel first looked at it and said, oh, this is a good moral religion, it's nice, he came in, he was trying to help reform Judaism and his faith and did that. And, those are all good things. But, there's no real big difference with him and Jesus's religions and all these other religions. And I think what Hegel came to realize later was is that this is what he was seeing when he saw Christianity, is he didn't have love, so it was just clanging cymbals. It was nothing. It was just noise. It was just not, that's not bad noise. It's just average noise. But then when love comes into it, something transforms, something changes. Something's radical. And we all know that feeling of love. I think most of us spend our life looking to be loved, or how we can love better or love others. But then we also have this group of people who we don't love and we don't care about and we don't think. But we can revolutionize their life with love too, because if we want that love, I'm betting they want some similar type of love too. Like how I'm using the Bible there. Right? So you have these ideas, and then Jesus goes on, love your neighbor as yourself. And then he goes, love your enemy. Love God with all your heart. But equally as important, love your neighbor as yourself. Corinthians 13 ends with, there's three things will remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. That's the consistent thing. Was it 1 John where it says God is love? So then you get Paul coming out in Galatians saying, even further going, well, there's no identity in Christ. As a matter of fact, Christianity is the denial of identity. You don't even identify, I don't even think you would identify as a Christian, not with any cultural reverence, cultural, what's the word I'm looking for?
You wouldn't identify as a Christian with any cultural...
No, like hierarchy. No hierarchy of type of thing. This is my identity. Love, I think, was the concept of the identity. And Paul, I think, is arguing that the Jew, no Gentile, female, slave nor free, we're all one in Christ. But I think he was also saying, but we're not even, we have no identity. So strips us of our identity. We're called to love, never give up, never lose faith, always be hopeful. Without this love, we're just noisemakers. We're just practicing some sort of moral code. Because the great thing about love is love goes past that. Love breaks through that. And then you'll see it in the Bible that love, Christ continuously uses love to go to change the Torah. To disagree with the Holy Scriptures, that Paul does it too, radically change things. Society's way of setting up self-worth and whose identity and finding worth in your identity. Paul goes, nope, no more of that. This love is going to be this great equalizer. So that becomes a really hard thing to do. Now, do I expect that I'm going to go out and do this today and you're going to go out and do this today? No. But I think that we can learn and we can grow from it, and we can read more and we can study more, and we become better at doing this, and that we can lose our identities in love. So, I think that's maybe that be all thing to all, I'm all things to all people kind of thing. When you said there's no identity as Christians, if Christian is actually a denial of the identity, which I think Dr. Rollins argues for as well, then we come into what idea of a true equality. We come into this idea of true equality. But I'm not going to get into that because it's a whole nother sermon, but I just want to think about that for a second. But equality, when we love this radical way, when love becomes this unstabilizing force in our lives, equality becomes a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. And I think a problem is rather than a lot of people having this, and I think this is what happens with religion, is I think a lot of us are raised to care about people. We have our parents that we love, and or maybe our family that we love as children, and even if that changes later, but we grow up with that. And then religion is kind of entered into it. The moral code comes into it. And so see, here we have love with this finger with the skull on it and the eyeball, and then we have cross for our moral law comes in. And what we start to do is we start to filter love through the moral law, because we think everything needs to go through this moral law. But the thing is, we've got it backwards. Love needs to be here, and the moral law can be back here, and then some things get through and some things don't. Because love becomes the filter. Rather than hiding, don't hide your light behind a bushel. Don't hide your love behind the moral law concept. I'll let love be the thing that really everything has to go through, the lens. I wear glasses so I can see, and things become clearer when I put them on, and I'll make those like that. So that's love for me. Is love makes things clear. It strips down identities. It makes me see a need for equality. It makes me to see like, oh, this person isn't treating this person right, and this isn't happening, this is happening, and there needs to be something that transforms here. Rather than seeing moral law. When moral law becomes our main concern, we end up with the religion we've had for 2,000 years, goods and bads. So there's that, and so we have failed at this greatly. But if we allow love and reason to be in our lives, and then we do something like we allow the two to become one. If we allow reason and love to become one, to unify together, and how we reason is through love and how we love is through reason, then something beautiful starts to happen. And I really believe that. Because now we're not reasoning through that moral code or that legalism or that law or that customs, that we're reasoning and love come hand in hand. And then there becomes a different type of reasoning. There comes more listening and more conversation and respect for others' humanity and one another's humanity. This is really tough stuff. It's really tough to fine-tune this thing in your life. I really try every day. Sometimes I just stay quiet and I go into my own hole because I just don't know how to do it, and I have to process it and I have to think about it and just think and sit by myself and think and read and think about it. But I think we failed at this greatly. But I think we've got to allow love and reason to go hand in hand. Now I'm stripping down some very complicated ideas, philosophical ideas. But I'm doing that so I can communicate it with you, because I don't know all the fancy words, and also hopefully encouraging you to take it further into an area that I could never speak on it, So Now I'm going to read a part to you from the Hegel book. Now this comes back to, oh, Jay, what were you saying about boundaries and loving, self-love and all this kind of stuff? And I want to read this to you because I think this is a part that you guys will probably push back on a little bit. Or, I might even push back on a little bit. So I'm going to read from a book so we realize that it's not me. You don't want to push back on me. You're going to push back on some people who have, one guy's really dead. And the other guy we'd have to track down. So I don't think he has an online account. What year is this? So, hear this. This is from this book right here, which is probably backwards for you guys, but I think Caleb already put up a link to it. But don't read it because then you'll know all my sermons ahead of time. Despite his newfound appreciation for Christianity, the Christian Revolution, Hegel does not accept everything that Christ has to say. He even questions the way that Christ formulates his most important statement, following Kant, but for a different reason. Now here, are you guys ready for this? Hegel cannot wholeheartedly accept Christ's injunction to love one's neighbor as oneself. Da da da. Now this is why it comes. This is. Hey, man. This is. I'm trying to answer this question with this book. We're going to tear it apart a little bit, but Hegel cannot wholeheartedly accept Christ's injunction to love one's neighbor as oneself. Now, Hegel is way more intelligent than me, or maybe more, maybe not more intelligent, probably more intelligent, definitely, but also way more educated, definitely more educated. I mean, this guy, I had no idea his understanding of the Bible, and I opened up some of his writings on religion, and I was just like, this guy didn't have the same books I've read and didn't have Google. And he knows a lot of stuff. Brilliant. I'm just blown away by the theology of this philosopher, or his understanding of philosophy. Okay, the problem is not that Hegel cannot imagine individuals capable of loving others with the same intensity that they love themselves, which is the typical cynical response to the injunction. Instead, he rejects out of hand the possibility of self-love, which reveals exactly the role that he gives love in his philosophy. And this is what he writes. He writes, "Love thy neighbor as thyself," this is Hegel, "does not mean to love him as much as yourself, for self-love is a word without meaning." Do you hear what I said? He said self-love is a word without meaning. Now, if he was alive today, I think people would give him a lot of meanings on that. But we're going to look at it now. So he doesn't believe that the word self-love has meaning? No, he doesn't. Christ's commandment does not make sense to Hegel because he conceives love as necessarily involving the other. Do you hear that? So it doesn't make sense to him because he sees love as necessarily involving the other. For him, he believes that love requires another person, that it's a relationship, that it's with the other. Now, if you accept this, I don't think that means you don't go to the therapist and that you don't do self-care and that you don't do things like that. I don't think that. But I think it's an interesting point that he's making, is that for him, love is something that you have to share with the other. That there has to be another person. That there has to be a relationship involved. That loving yourself doesn't add up to him for some reason, because I think he understands that, well, I'm a human being and instinctively I am taught to take care of myself, to feed myself, to do this. I don't know if he's thinking about mental health or anything like that. I honestly don't know the context within what he's writing. So I'll try to figure that out later. But I do think he's saying, I'm obviously going to take care of myself. So what does this mean for Hegel? As a result, Hegel interprets the Christ's commandment as a significant that one must love the other as being akin to oneself. Not a superior, now listen to this, not a superior or an inferior. The other must be equal in order to enable the subject to identify indifferences. Hegel's rewriting of the Christian injunction indicates that his investment in love stems from the introduction of radical difference into the subject's identity. For Hegel, it is impossible to love oneself. Love always involves an investment in otherness. That would negate the subject. Through its call for love, Christianity makes it clear that identity is constantly involved with what would negate it. Did you hear that? Christianity makes it clear that identity is constantly involved with that what would negate it. Neither male nor female, nor Jew nor Gentile, slave or free, Christian or atheist. Love is the experience of this involvement. So Christianity makes it clear that the identity is constantly involved with that would negate it, and love is the experience of this involvement. So saying that when you constantly love people and doing that, you will sometimes be negating yourself. That's tough for me. But I thought this was a beautiful thing, so I wanted to share it with you guys. But what I really love, and I want to just focus on before we do the Q&A, is this back here, this one line that says, love the other as being akin to oneself, not as a superior or as an inferior. So I think he's kind of doing something philosophers often do and confusing us. Intentionally confusing us because he's so smart. But the idea is still, in Hegel's eyes, the equality is still a given. No one's above me, no one's below me. Now, I think growing up Christian, there's this martyrism that you grew up with, like, oh, I hope one day I die for Jesus. If you ever watch those rapture videos, and if you didn't get the 666, you got your head chopped off or something, you know, and like,
to your head.
Like, no, do you want Jesus or not? I stand for my God, boom, or you know, like, get the mark. Okay, I'll take the mark. Oh, we lost him.
It's like romanticized.
You know, and so yeah, we romanticize this idea of that being a martyr, or you know, oh, I am nothing. I'm a piece of shit. I think that a lot of that comes from Calvinism. A lot of strong Calvinism is like, oh, God's so good and grace is so amazing, and I'm just a piece of horrible crap that, you know, God in the hands, or sinners in the hands of an angry God.
Total degradation.
Yeah, so I'm just, I'm horrible, you know, and yeah, I'm horrible, and I'm also sweet and good at a lot of things and horrible at a lot of things. Okay, folks, but the idea is here is he's saying, you don't put anybody above you. You don't put anybody beneath you. You know, that doesn't mean I can't look at someone like my buddy Pete and go like, man, his education, I really love what he has to say, and I really want to learn from my buddy Pete. Or, man, I really love, you know, Bell's comments, or I really love Martin Luther King, but man, he read more Tillich than I did, and he's got all this figure, and how did he come from this to this to this, and you know, how can I be, you know, I can aspire to be like that, aspire to learn from those people, but at the same time, I've recently come to a place in my life where I'm happy to communicate it the way I communicate it. Like, I don't have to communicate it the way King communicated it, or the way Rollins communicates it, or Bell communicates it, or, you know, Hegel communicated it. You know, I just, you know, I've got my few friends that we get together here on FaceTime and listen to the podcast, and I communicate it my own way, and I'm glad that there's a few other crazy folks out there who relate to my brain. But we don't ever put people above us or below us. And do you think about that? That's kind of a beautiful way. I mean, that's equality. You know, when we see things like saying Black Lives Matters, well, if we didn't put a black person or any person below us or above us, and we did, you know, we all were that. There, and with that concept of love, there's something that radically happens there. And if this love is something that I experience with other people, I can kind of understand what Hegel's saying. I'm probably doing it complete injustice. I'm sure I am. But for me to love myself, I had to go to therapists. I had to have a relationship with someone else and have a communication for me to understand myself and to be comfortable in my skin. For me to love my enemies, it was great to read in the Bible, but I really didn't understand the depths of it until I read Martin Luther King Jr., until I practiced nonviolence. So I think this is talking about true equality. And I hope you guys can read through the lines here of what this really means. I hope that when you hear this sermon and you've listened to even talks in the past, that this moment of revolution that we're in right now, all the work that I've been trying to do has always been to be alive in times like this. It's always been in uncertainty and not knowing what's happening, in violence, in pain, in revolution. This whole message is the type that, like, okay, it's theory. Okay, now it's time to put it to work. And these are the moments when this type of stuff works. These are the type of moments when we take it from concept to reality. And that's revolution's always stood with people, and we always will. And because it's just to me, it's a no-brainer. And I wish I had something more radical to say, but for me, it's just live life well and help others live life well, and do that to the best of our abilities. Well, we're going to do a few questions here. I see we've a lot of people have jumped off. Football must be back on.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, NASCAR,
NASCAR, man.
Yeah,
It's NASCAR season, man. I have a question for you, Jay, and I wrote down a bunch of other ones.
No questions from Caleb. Caleb is banned.
Well, then you're not going to have any Q&A. I was wondering, when you use the term moral law or moral code, is that learned? Is that like a cultural moral law?
I think so. I think it's either learned from your faith and from your parents and from society as a whole,
Is that like a personal moral compass kind of thing? Is that what that is?
Maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. It's like a lot of these people who grew up and are like, America. But they were raised where their grandfather fought in World War II, and their parents, maybe their parents were in Vietnam, or they have different ideas, and it's easy for me to be like, oh, you just worship the flag, and not realizing what lies behind that.
Yeah.
Even if it may be misguided, how do I love that person to go like, hey, can we talk and figure this out? And just be like, that's how I reflects on me, and then them sit down and go like, well, this is why, you know what I mean? This is my moral compass.
Okay, yeah.
And this is why I try. Like, if you grew up in the South, in like where I grew up in like North Carolina, and you grew up in like Berkeley, California, and we both come together, we might have different moral compasses just based on our life experiences in states.
So it's really subjective kind of
I think it is subjective.
Yeah, okay. Bob said, I differentiate between the behaviors of people who say they are Christians and the love expressed by the leading of the Spirit, sometimes contradicting the behavior of the so-called Christians.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I also wanted to say before I forget, is that, can you see the contradictions in Corinthians 13? How do I be transparent? I've had people in my life who I loved unconditionally. Almost like Corinthians 13, okay? And I realized that probably wasn't the best way to love that person. That wasn't the best way to do it. I became a doormat. And I had to learn other ways to love. So also, like, love doesn't demand its own way. I mean, there just seems to be some contradictions there. And so what I want to find out is, where is the unmovable contradiction? And then where is the one that we can remove? because I have certain relationships that I've had to remove. Certain things where I have to love, conditionally. I have to have conditions in that love, or it will destroy me and destroy them, and it won't. And the love will disappear.
Is it conditions on the love or on how you express the love?
How you express the love, how you live that love out.
Okay.
What you're willing to accept. Like anybody who's been, I think there's a lot of people who are in abusive relationships that aren't just codependent, but I think they've been taught this concept of love that just is, and that we teach in the church. It's just this I just got to love past that. I got to love this enemy. I got to love past it, and it ends up being this really masochistic, destructive thing.
Yeah.
We get it with the sacrifices. You want to make sacrifices, or sacrifice yourself, or be the martyr.
Yeah.
So we have to learn. I guess that's where boundaries come in. In some places, some of these boundaries will cause the love to continue and grow. And just finding out where the movable contradictions are.
Mm-hmm. And then Lisa...
I'm an armchair philosopher. Here's my armchair over here.
Okay, Lisa said love is unconditional acceptance. Unconditional acceptance says racism is baked into our systems of engagement on personal and collective levels. Accepting this opens up a space to determine what we are personally and collectively willing to tolerate.
Yeah, no, and I also think there's a part of capitalism that plays into it, and in poverty that plays into it.
Oh, yeah.
And media that we've allowed to play into it. And just silent message. I think it's something, I think it's, and I think just the idea of just someone looks different. Someone has a different culture. Someone has something different. And I think we've horribly failed at that, too.
Yeah.
I think that's why, it feels like there's all these different types of racism. And honestly, and then right now there's very violent racism.
Yes.
And I think we have to nip that sucker in the bud right away.
Mm-hmm.
And then we need to start thinking better of how do we change these other types of racisms and classism.
That's interesting.
Because I think part of racism is classism that's projected onto the African American community through people of privilege and power.
Yeah. Zoe says, this community helps me remain connected to those who are different than me. It has changed me. It helps me drive out my darkness.
Well, that's nice to hear.
That is nice.
Hopefully we get Lawrence to come and speak for us soon and do a Q&A as well. Because
that's a great idea.
I think I'd rather have, my black brother come in and talk a little bit more about the effects of racism and the changes of racism. That's who I call. When I have a question, I call Lawrence on the phone and go, hey, Lawrence, I need to check this out with you. Am I right? Am I wrong here? What's your experience?
How you confront an outspoken, violent racist? I don't know if they're like the Proud Boys. But they're more just, they go into bars and beat up gay people and minorities and stuff.
Oh, jeez. That's awful.
But,
rides here. Oh. Sorry, my car's in the shop, so I had to get a ride.
But how you confront a violent racist is going to be different from how you confront, I don't know, an older person who's just they've just been saturated with the systemic racism. Anyway, so Zoe says, accepting and pursuing a life of love has often resulted in a great deal of pain. Fear and pain avoidance have been the greatest enemies to me pursuing a life of love. Pain avoidance, that's interesting.
Yeah, me too. And then realizing, once again, we were looking at, what contradictions are stuck and need to stay, and what contradictions can we get rid of. I think that's another thing, is fear and pain avoidance is which of those need to be moved as well. Maybe a little pain avoidance isn't necessarily bad, But how do we make that mutual in relationships? And I have people I fear, and how do I continue to allow that to be healthy?
That's
When is it healthy, and when is it destructive? Perfect love casts out all fear.
So, and then here's another good one. Michael was responding to a little conversation inside the chat about the difference between love for self and love for others.
Okay.
And Michael said, I think that the love is different. We are to love others as Christ loves the church. Me as an individual should allow myself to accept the gift we are given, which is grace. To accept the grace in ourselves is loving ourselves. Not self-love, but accepting the grace we are freely given, which is so hard. To not be angry or disappointed in ourselves, jealous, or feeling but I did this, I gave that, which is selfish. Just simply being humble and grateful that we have grace.
It's awesome. I'm definitely gonna go in and probably talk to Pete a little bit about Hegel's unbelief and self-love, because that's very interesting to me.
Yeah, that is interesting. Maybe he's like making a distinction between. Yeah, I don't know.
I have no idea.
And then one last comment here. Lisa says, it's not. I'm not sure what this is responding to. It's not a condition on the love.
Okay, I wanted to read that one.
But on how we can express it in healthy ways to keep us available to continue to love.
It's not conditioning on love.
On the love.
How we express it. Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's a good insight. It's how do we express it, and how do we receive it? And how do we allow it to be received? And
right.
And man, everybody's different. I mean, that's another thing, is that love is. I think this might be why there's so many contradictions within the concepts of love, and why love embraces that, because we're all so different. I mean, my friendships, me and your friendship's different than somebody else. Me and Kurt's relationship, or me and Lawrence's relationship, or me and whatever. And romantic relationships I've been in, they're different people, they're different things. I've often made the mistake of going in from one romantic relationship to another and having a whole set of rules.
Yeah.
But those whole set of rules were based on the person that I was with before, and how I experienced that. So I was like,
right.
And here are my boundaries, and then realizing but these folks, the boundaries have to change, because this is a place of these things that were boundaries here are shared moments with this person.
Yeah.
They're not walking on me here. We're having a shared moment.
Right.
So it's like I've had, and I've always learned that the hard way by being like, oh, I'm sorry. I was comparing you to the last person.
Yeah. Do you think that's like a form of baggage?
Yeah, it's a form of baggage.
Yeah. But I guess the other person's probably oftentimes bringing in their own baggage too.
Oh,
huh?
yeah, we all are.
Yeah. Because you have needs that you need to get met, but then the way that person is going to apply themselves to meeting those needs is going to be different from how the last person did.
Yeah.
It's like I need to feel appreciated, but I need to fight for it with this person, whereas that person's going to give me free.
Or, maybe that person the last person took advantage of you, or you took advantage of them in a certain place, and there has to be a restructuring.
Big congrats to Michael. He says, we were blessed to have a grandbaby number 8 born yesterday.
Whoa, congratulations.
Number 8.
Time to start a commune.
Yeah, you can start a good little team.
You could be
almost a baseball team, huh?
Have a bigger denomination, a bigger church than us.
Yeah. It's pretty good. Yeah, physical congregation.
You have more grandkids than Revolution has physical congregants.
He's not wrong.
Could you send them to Revolution?
Yeah. I think that's about it.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks so much. I hope this one caused you to think, and be careful out there. Love each other. I love seeing your faces and talking to you guys. I love seeing you on Twitter and Instagram too when we run into each other there, and I can't wait for us all to be human beings again and hang out. And hopefully, maybe next year we'll all get together in Las Vegas or something and all hang out and do a Revolution gathering. So, if the world is if the murder hornets aren't ruling us by that point. All right, love you guys. Have a great week. Yeah, this was a great conversation. I love hearing from you guys. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
we'd like to remind you that our ministry is supported 100% by listeners like you. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.
That was a post-Christian podcast.